Hey, Aubrey, how's it going today?
I'm great. How are you, Lindsay?
Good. I'm glad to be recording on the microphone, but I have a question for you today.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so what do you think? What comes to your mind when someone says the word native?
Oh, that is an interesting question because not just one thing.
Yeah.
I definitely think of Native Americans. I
Uh
think
huh.
of the restaurant Native New Yorker. I think of Native English speakers. I think of
Yeah.
someone saying they're a native of Boston. We use
Yeah.
this word so many ways in English.
Yeah, we really do. It's all over the place. But today we're going to hone in on one interesting aspect of this word native. Tell us what we're talking about today, Aubrey.
Yeah, so there's a very common mistake in English by English learners to call all native English speakers in the US Native Americans. Often, if they mean to say native English speakers, then they'll say Native Americans, just sort of thinking all English speakers in America. This is tricky because we do call them native speakers, but Native Americans has a very specific meaning.
Yes, I love that. So we want to draw attention to this and make sure that we kind of stop this mistake right here and get really clear on the terms for when we're talking about again native speakers of English. And then Aubrey, we're going to go into another area which is super important in our culture, right? What are we going to get
Exactly.
into?
Yes, the terms have really evolved for Native Americans, the terms that they prefer that everyone use, and especially that non-Native Americans use. So we're
Mhm.
going to go into that, the evolution of language, respectful terms. This is very important in US culture. So not only are you learning about the differences and all the ways that we use Native, but also some of these very important language changes.
Yes, great topic today. Super important topic today. So, guys, hit the follow button. We cover all kinds of topics here on All Ears English: idiom, slang, vocabulary, grammar, culture. This is what you need to connect directly with people in English. So, hit follow on the show. All right.
All right, let's dive
Aubrey,
into
let's get
native
started.
first of
Yes.
all, right?
Yes.
So, of course, we use this term to talk about people whose first language, whose mother tongue is English or Spanish, right? Native Spanish speakers, native English speakers. That's just
Hmm.
if it's your first language.
Yeah. So you could also say native speakers of English. You could also say native speakers of American English. I suppose you could say that as well. What do you think, Aubrey?
Right, or native speakers of British English, right?
Hmm.
Exactly, or native British English speakers. A lot of options here. You might ask someone, are you a native speaker? This just means, is this your first language? Is this your mother tongue?
Yeah, but the key takeaway here, guys, is we don't want to say Native Americans when we mean to say native speakers of English. Okay. Different
Exactly.
thing. All right, good.
Yeah, Native
Yes.
Americans, let's go into that next. This refers to indigenous peoples in the United States. So you might
Mhm.
say, my best friend is Native American. She's Cherokee, right? So
Yeah.
this has a very different meaning than native English speakers, right?
Yes. Yes.
Anyone whose first language is English, you can refer to that as. But if you say Native Americans, you are specifically referring to these indigenous people.
Yes. And historically, we've used a term which we don't want to use anymore. And what is that term to talk about Native Americans that we used to use, Aubrey?
Yes, so they used to often be referred to as American Indians or just Indians. This
Mhm.
is because when Christopher Columbus came, he thought he was landing in India. He was very
Mm,
wrong. And
interesting.
so this mistake had just sort of was passed down through time, through language. But we now know that the preferred term is either Native Americans or Indigenous people or natives.
Yeah, important to know. Uh, love this. Super, super important to know. And Aubrey, you brought some information from a panel. There was a panel that happened. When and where did this happen?
Yeah, so this was May 2021 in Mississippi. And what's really interesting about this panel is the contributors were from many different Native nations.
Hmm.
So, what's tricky when it comes to Native Americans is there are 574 federally recognized Native nations, all with their own unique history,
Yeah.
language, government. And so, there is no set rule book or guidebook for the terms that all of these governments, these nations would prefer. So this
Hmm.
panel was great because it had people from a lot of different nations that could share sort of generally use these terms. Generally, these terms are what we would prefer. But then they
Hmm.
made a really good point that you should definitely ask if you know Native Americans, ask them what terms they would prefer because we
Hmm.
can't assume that every one of them would prefer these terms.
Absolutely, 100%. So always ask the question. I mean, that's a best practice no matter who we're talking with. How would you like to be addressed? Right? Those
Yeah, exactly.
conversations actually build connection and build respect, right?
Exactly. It's the same with someone's name, right? If we ask
Yeah.
someone if they go by a nickname or if we're pronouncing their name correctly, we want to know as much as possible, just like you said, Lindsay, to build that connection to make sure we're being respectful.
Yeah. So we have a direct quote from the panel, which we can glean a lot of insight from here,
Yes.
Aubrey, right?
Yeah. Do you want to
Uh,
read it?
Yeah, okay. Here's what they said on the panel. In terms of the term Native American, if you're talking about groups of people from multiple nations, use Native American, Native, or Indigenous. Ideally, if you can, check with the group to determine how they'd like to be referenced. You may see the term American Indian used too. Native Governance Center does not recommend that non native folks use the terms American Indian or Indian. However, this is a matter of preference. You may find that another native organization recommends something different. So again, you need to ask, right?
Yeah,
On an individual
definitely. Right.
level. Yeah.
Best to ask on an individual level, but in general,
Mhm.
best to avoid the term Indian or American Indian, right? Native Americans is safe here.
Mhm.
But there were some other really interesting language terms, evolution of terms that I used and was familiar with as a young person, as a young adult,
Yes.
that I saw from this panel that I think we should share. I think it's
Mhm.
really good to know all of these terms and make sure that we're using the most respectful terms
Yes.
possible.
Yeah, exactly. So when we were kids in school, we always learned the word reservation, right?
Right.
At least in the 80s and the 90s, we learned that. But now we want to say something different. What is that, Aubrey? What is the better term to use?
Yeah, native lands. So this is land owned by Native Americans. You might say, there are a lot of native lands in Arizona. There are a lot of
Mhm.
native lands just north of where I live.
Yes.
And this is a hard habit to break for a lot of Americans, a lot of us in the States, because
Mhm.
we're used to saying reservation, like you said.
Yeah.
But I can definitely understand why, right? There is a very important reason for these language changes. If some of these terms really are reminders of atrocities and colonization,
Yeah.
I can understand wanting the terms to be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the way to show that respect and build the relationship is to adhere to these and respect them. So, number three, actually, this is interesting, right? So, the word tribe is what we originally learned in school, but what has happened with the word tribe?
Yeah. So this panel was saying that most Native Americans would prefer that we use the term nation instead of tribe. And this is because globally we have sort of trivialized the term tribe. We'll say,
Hmm.
I've found my tribe, which means
Yeah.
like I've found people that are like me, or bride tribe, you've heard probably, right? So they would prefer the term nation. This shows respect for
Yeah.
sovereignty
Yeah.
and the fact that Native nations each have their own system of government.
Yeah, I think what's happened is, marketing has gotten its hands on the term tribe, marketing
Right.
psychology and marketing, and it's used to create communities, right? I don't think we use that term here at Dollars English, but I've seen other, brands, podcasts, communities that do use that term, and it's marketing, right, to bring together a group. Really interesting. So I
Yeah, definitely.
understand. Yeah, I
Yeah. They're
understand the
not saying,
thinking.
"How dare you, don't call yourselves tribes." They're saying,
Mhm.
"We would actually prefer you not use that term to refer to us," right? We are native
Yeah,
nations,
yeah.
and good to know because that is also a big change from the language I used as a young adult.
Yes, super interesting. Love it. Okay, Aubrey, we have a role play. So this will be interesting as a role play. Let's see what this looks like. What's the scenario here?
Yeah, so you and I are acquaintances that have run into each other at a party, and we have been just getting to know each other better. Wanna start
All
us
right.
out?
Yes. I heard you're learning Spanish. Is that right?
Yes, my goal is to be able to speak as well as a native speaker, but I've got a long way to go.
Same. I've been learning Spanish off and on for a long time, but getting to that native speaker level is no joke.
You're a native of Boston, right?
No, actually, I was born and raised in New Hampshire. What about you?
Oh, I'm from Idaho, but I've lived in Arizona for over 20 years.
Are there a lot of native lands in Idaho?
Yes, the Shoshone-Bannock Nation is not far from where I grew up. It's the largest in Idaho.
Interesting. In Colorado, we also have a lot of native lands. Super interesting and important to kind of get to know the cultures, right, and learn about it.
Yes, absolutely. Really interesting. I don't know. Have you ever watched the show Yellowstone, Lindsay?
No, I missed that. It was really hot for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people really loved it. I watched some of the first season with my parents, and I feel
Okay.
like there are a lot of Native American actors, a lot of Native American characters in that show. And I thought it was interesting about getting into like the current culture and the native lands and some of the politics and some tricky things about like farmers who are trying to rent native lands. And so that might be an
Mhm.
interesting show to learn more about US culture.
Yeah, super interesting. Or there was a really good movie that came out a few years ago. It was a long movie, but it was really good. It had Leonardo DiCaprio in it. I'm trying to think of what the name was. Do you remember
Revenant
that?
is the one where he's attacked by a bear.
No, 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 no. It's
Oh.
much later than that. It was just a few years ago. That was a good one too.
Oh.
I'm trying to.
Oh,
I'll
yes, and it won, like, an Academy Award.
yes,
Or
about.
the what
Mhm.
was that called? I'm gonna look it up really quick because she, I think, was the
She's
first
a
Native
fantastic
American to
actress.
win
Yes. When
Best Actress.
it's not Wind River, that's a different movie, which was also really good, by the way. We will come up with that, and we will add that to the show notes or
Killers of
somewhere.
the Flower Moon.
There you
Killers of the
go.
Flower Moon, and it was
Really
about the
good movie.
murders of the Osage Native Americans in the
Osage Train.
1920s.
Yes, 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 yes. Really, really good stuff. A good movie. I
Yeah,
highly
definitely.
recommend it. Yeah.
Okay, let's
Uh,
go through this role play. All of these terms here and a bonus that we threw in. I first said,
mhm.
I want to be able to speak Spanish as well as a native speaker. So I just mean someone who their first language is Spanish.
Yes, and then I said same. I've been learning Spanish off and on for a long time, but getting to that native speaker level is no joke. That native speaker level. Okay?
Yeah, where you are as fluent as someone whose first language is Spanish. I love
Mhm.
this expression, no joke. Means
Yeah.
like extremely difficult.
Yeah, I love it too. I remember I had a friend who used to always refer to hiking specific mountains as no joke. That mountain is you're gonna hike that this weekend? That is no
That is
joke.
no joke. That is perfect, right? If it's
Yeah,
extremely difficult, okay, it's
yeah.
no joke. Take it seriously,
Yeah,
right?
bring some, shelter or something, you know?
Right. And then we have
Alright.
our bonus here. I said, "You're a native of Boston, right?" This is another way we use native to ask
Mhm,
someone where they're born and raised. I'm a native of Idaho, right? Southeast Idaho, that's where I was
mhm.
born and raised.
Yes, perfect. And then I said, "Are there a lot of native lands in Idaho?" So now we're
Yeah.
talking about Native American lands, right?
Yes, exactly. And if you
Mhm,
hear someone use the term reservation, means the same thing. This is historically what was used, but
mhm.
hopefully this message will be getting out to help people know that the preferred term is native lands.
Yes, very good. And then the
And
last one, Aubrey, what'd you say?
yeah, I said the Shoshone-Bannock Nation is not far from where I grew up. So this is the way we would now say it rather than the Shoshone-Bannock Reservation. That's what I would have said as a teenager. Instead, we would say nation.
All right. Super interesting, really important. Also, because our listeners, our students are using the term, native speaker all the time. And
Right.
it is okay. And we've shown you kind of how these overlap a little bit and gone into a really important topic about how to connect with communities. Okay.
Yes, and really helpful to know more about the culture in the US and to know who you are referring to if you say Native Americans.
Yes. Really good topic. Thanks for bringing this to the show, Aubrey. Good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks. See you next time.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.